Assalamualaikum and good morning to Sir Shahmin. My name is Nurfat binti Mama Effendi, and today I want to present about ecology. So first of all, let's take a look at the concepts and definitions of ecology. So ecology is the study of how organisms interact with one another and with their physical environment, and it shows the science of relationship. So the term of ecologist comes from the Greek word which is ecologist. Ox means home or surround, while logs means study. So it can be said that ecology is the study of Earth's household, including plants, animals, microorganisms, and human beings live together as interdependent components. So now, the environment are made up by two factors, which is biotic factors and abiotic factors. For biotic factors, it consists of all living organisms inhabiting the earth, while abiotic factors consist of non-living parts of the environment, including temperature, light, and soil. So next, we move to the level organization in ecology. So here there are five levels of organization, including individual, population, community, ecosystem, and biosphere. So the smallest level here is individual. It also called as organism. In individual, any unicellular or multicellular form exhibiting all of the characteristics of life. The population is the group of organisms of one species living in the same place and at the same time. Community is several interacting populations that inhabit a common environment and interdependent. Community ecologists investigate the factors influencing community structure, biodiversity, and the distribution and abundance of species. These factors include the interrelations with the non-living world and different collections of interrelations that take between species. The primary focus of community ecology is on predation, herbivory, competition, and parasitism and mutualism. For ecosystem is the populations in a community and with in the abiotic factor with which they interact. For ecosystem, the studies of ecosystem includes the study of certain process that link living to the non-living, and these components are said to be joined together via nutrient sequences and flows. And the last one, which is the highest level of organization, is biosphere. So biosphere is the surface of the earth. It is life-supporting uh, portions of Earth composed of air, land, and also fresh and salt water. Now, I want to compare the habitat with as niche. Okay, habitat is the place in which an organism lives out its life, and it provides the types of food, shelter, moisture, and temperature needs for survival. While niche is the role of a species plays in a community to survive, avoid danger, and obtain food and shelter. Next, how organisms use to get food. So organism can divide into two groups, which is autotroph and heterotroph. In autotroph, the organism can make their own food by photoautotroph or chemoautotroph process, and they usually form the base of food chain and food web. So photoautotroph is when they use energy from sunlight to make organic compound like sugars out of carbon dioxide in photosynthesis. For example, plants. On the other hand, chemoautotroph is when they use energy from chemicals to boil organic compound out of carbon dioxide or similar molecules, and it is also called as chemosynthesis process. For instance, there are hydrogen sulfide oxidizing chemoautotrophic bacteria found in undersea when communities where no light can reach. Uh, so for heterotroph, Heterotroph is the organism that cannot make their own food, which means that they cannot capture light or chemical energy to make their own food out of carbon dioxide. So these organisms get organic molecules by eating other organisms or their byproduct. So now I want to tell about feeding relationship. Feeding relationship consists of three types, which is producer, consumer, and decomposers. Producers usually is all autotroph, which are like plants which can make their own foods, while consumer have another three types, which is herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. For herbivores, the animals only eat plants. For carnivores, the animals only eat meats, while for omnivores, the animals eat both plants and meats. Next, decomposers. Decomposers is the organism that break down the complex compounds of dead and decaying plants and animals. Fungi and bacteria are the key decomposers in many ecosystems. They use the chemical energy in that matter and waste to fuel their metabolic processes. Decomposers as a group serve a crucial role in maintaining the health of ecosystems. They release the nutrients that can be recycled and used as building blocks by primary producers when they break down dead materials and trash. Next, we move to this is examples of herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and decomposers. Zebra is the examples for herbivores. Lion is the example for carnivores. Omnivores examples is bear, and decomposers can be found in mushroom. Okay, now I want to share about food chain. A food chain is a linear sequence of organisms through which nutrients and energy pass as one organism eats another. And it also can be said a food chain is the sequence of who is whom in a biological community to obtain nutrition. So a food chain starts with the primary energy source, usually the sun. Okay, the next link is the in the chain is an organism that can make their own food from the primary energy sources, which in this picture, that the producer is grass. So next uh, is the organism that eat the autotroph, and this organism is called herbivores or primary consumers. In this chain, the grasshopper is the primary consumers. The next link in the chain is animals that eat herbivores called secondary consumer. In this picture, the frogs acts as secondary consumer because frogs can eat grasshopper. In turn, these animals is eaten by animals that eat herbivores. Sorry. In turn, these animals are eaten by larger predator called tertiary consumer. So this in this chain, snake can eat frog and make it as tertiary consumer. Um, and then the tertiary consumers are also can get eaten by quaternary consumer, or we call it as apex consumer too. And in this chain, hog can eat snake and act as a quaternary consumer. Each food and with a top predator, an animal with no natural enemies. However, after that, the composer will take turn to eat uh, that animals. Like if hog is dead, so decomposers acts as the last um, things to eat animals dead. So this chain showed a simple chain which we can see who eat whom is simplest. However, we can see that in a food web. So food web shows all possible feeding relationships in a community at each trophic level. So trophic level actually represent a network of feeding step in the transfer of energy and matter in an ecosystem. So food web actually quite similar with food chains. Each as a food web represents a network of interconnected food chains. So in this picture, we can see that there are many of food chains in one circle. So we can see that grasses also happen to be the producer, but there are three primary consumer, which can be grasshopper, mouse, and rabbit, and there are secondary consumer that which can be bird, frog, owl, or the fox, and also tertiary consumer can be snake, owl, and yes, and hawk here can be the last one, which is happen to be quaternary consumer. So next we look at the interspecies interactions. So interspecies interactions is the interactions between two or more species, and there are three types, which is competition, predation, and symbiosis. For competition, two different species fight for the same limited resource, and here both participants will suffer from the competition, as one species would have a higher chance of survival and reproduction if the other was not present. The second is predation. Predation occurs when a member of one species, called predator, eats part of all the living body of another organism, which we call as prey. So the predator is the animal that hunts and kills other animals for food. A predator is a consumer, which can be carnivore or can be omnivore. While prey is the animal that is hunted and caught for food. And prey is usually is a consumer, and but it may be a herbivore, omnivore, and also it can be carnivore. And the last one is symbiosis. Symbiosis is when two species of organisms live together in a long-term and intimate association. So now we look at the symbiotic relationship. So in symbiotic relationship, there are in three types, which is commensalism, parasitism, and mutualism. So this is the table that can show if there is the animal that can get benefits or get harmed or unaffected in these relationships. So in commensalism, there is one animal that will get benefit and another animal will unaffected, where it neither get benefits nor harm. In parasitism, one animal will get benefits while one another animals get harm. In mutualism, both animals can get benefits from the relationships. So this is the examples of commensalism, mutualism, and parasitism. In commensalism, we can see that cattle egrets eat the insects stirred up by the cattle when they are grazing. In mutualism, these Ocularis clownfish are hiding in an environment. So both of clownfish and environment can get benefits from these relationships because they can avoid the predators. While in parasitism, we can see the a tomato hornworm is covered with cocoons of pupating braconid webs. So from this relationship, we can see that there are numerous types of interactions between creatures in an ecosystem, and it is not uncommon for one organism to wear various hats and play multiple roles at different times. When we hunt, kill, and eat the animals like fish or chicken, we are both consumers and predators. Other species, such as our dogs or cats, have various mutualistic ties with us. Humans compete for resources, even mates. Interactions between species, including humans, are a natural part of life and have a huge impact on ecosystem function and health. Now we move to biogeochemical cycles. Chemical elements, including all essential elements of protoplasm, tend to circulate in biosphere characteristic paths from environment to organism and organism to environment paths known as the biogeochemical cycle. The term biogeochemical is derived from bio, meaning biosphere, geo, meaning geological environment, and chemical, meaning the elements that move through a cycle. All the chemical ingredients that make up living cells must be continuously recycled in order for the living components of a significant ecosystem, like a lake or forest, to exist. On Earth, matter is preserved and exists in the form of atoms. Since matter cannot be generated or destroyed, it is recycled in numerous ways throughout the Earth system. All elements are present in a closed system, and the Earth receives energy from the Sun, which is radiated back as a heat. The major elements include oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, water, and phosphorus. These elements are recycled through the abiotic and biotic components of the ecosystem. So first we look at the water cycle. In Earth, 97.5% of water is actually is salt water, and only 2.5% of it is a fresh water. Many living things depends on this small supply of surface fresh water. Before this, I know that fresh water is so limited for us, but I just know that only 0.3% of fresh water is found in lakes and rivers, and the other 30.8% of fresh water is in groundwater, and 68.9% in glaciers and permanent snow cover. So that means less than 1% of fresh water in lakes and rivers we need to supply for us to live. So now we move to the process that involve in water cycle. Water cycle is responsible for maintaining weather conditions. The water in its various forms interacts with the surroundings and change the temperature and pressure of the atmosphere. So during this process, water changes its state from one phase to another, but the total number of water particles remains the same. Water changes its state through a variety of processes, including evaporation, sublimation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration, and runoff. So now we look at one each of the process. So first, evaporation. The sun is the ultimate source of energy, and it powers most of the evaporation that occurs on Earth. Evaporation generally happens when water molecules at the surface of water bodies become excited and rise into the air. So this is the picture, one of the example of water cycle. So here we can see the water from the sea or lake evaporate to the air. So these molecules with the highest kinetic energy accumulate into water vapor clouds. Evaporation usually takes place below the boiling point of water. Another process called evapotranspiration occurs when evaporation occurs through the leaves of plants. This process contributes to a large percentage of water in the atmosphere. So second, sublimation. Sublimation occurs when snow or ice change directly into water vapor without becoming water. It usually occurs as a result of dry winds and low humidity. Sublimation can be observed on mountain peaks where the air pressure is quite low. So the low air pressure helps to sublimate the snow into water vapor as less energy is utilized in the process. Another example of sublimation is the phase where fog billows from dry ice. On Earth, the primary source of sublimation is from the ice sheets covering the poles of the Earth. And now we look at condensation. So the condensation is the process where the water vapor that accumulated in the atmosphere eventually cools down due to the low temperatures found at high altitudes. So these vapors become tiny droplets of water and ice eventually coming together to form clouds. Next, precipitation. Above 0 degrees centigrade, the vapors will condense into water droplets. However, it cannot condense without dust or other impurities. Hence, water vapors attach itself onto the particle surface. When enough droplets merge, it falls out of the clouds and onto the ground below. So this process is called precipitation or rainfall. In particularly cold weather or extremely low air pressure, the water droplets freeze and fall as snow or hail. So next, infiltration. The process of infiltration is when rainwater gets absorbed into the ground. The level of absorption varies based on the material the water has seeped into. For instance, rocks will retain comparatively less water than soil, so groundwater can either follow streams or rivers, but sometimes it might just sink deeper, forming aquifers. And the last one is runoff. If the water from rainfall does not form aquifers, it follows gravity, often flowing down the sides of mountains and hills, eventually forming rivers. This process is called runoff. In colder regions, ice caps form when the amount of snowfall is faster than the rate of evaporation or sublimation. The biggest ice caps on the Earth are found at the poles. So all these steps mentioned above occur cyclically with neither a fixed beginning nor an end. So this is the what example for water cycle. So this is the implications of water cycle. So first, water cycle has a tremendous impact on the climate. For example, the greenhouse effect will cause a rise in temperature. Without the evaporative cooling effect of the water cycle, the temperature on Earth would rise drastically. Second, water cycle affects all life processes in Earth and that it become an integral part of biogeochemical cycle. And the last one, water cycle helps to clean the air. For instance, during the process of precipitation, water vapors have to attach themselves onto particles of dust. Raindrops are also known to pick up biological agents such as bacteria and industrial soot particles and smoke. Now we move to the carbon cycle. What is carbon cycle? Carbon exists in the air largely as carbon dioxide gas, which dissolves in water and reacts with water molecules to produce bicarbonate. It can be classified into two types based on the duration of the process, which is short-term and long-term. In long-term, this type of occurs within a relatively short period of time. It is named as such because it takes just days, months, or years for carbon to flow across the various carbon reservoirs. On the other hand, long-term takes thousands of years to occur. The excess carbon from the short-term cycle is stored for a long time before they are released. So before I share with you about the importance of carbon cycle, let's take a look at the process of carbon cycle first. So this is the stages of carbon cycle, and the picture shows how carbon cycle is doing. So first, carbons enter the food chain, both terrestrial and aquatic, through autotroph. So here, plants need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis process. So heterotroph consume the organic molecule. So this cow eats plants and get the carbon dioxide. And also, um, animals release carbon dioxide through their respiration process. So when plants and animals die, they decompose by decomposers. So carbon released back into the atmosphere. And carbon that not released back into the atmosphere is eventually converted into fossil fuels. And these fossil fuels are used in humans' activities such as factory activities, and they release more carbon into the atmosphere. So the atmosphere then recycle back into the plants for photosynthesis activity, and they get recycled like that. So now we take a look back at the importance of carbon cycle. So even though carbon dioxide is found in small traces in the atmosphere, it plays a vital role in balancing the energy and traps the long-wave radiations from the sun. Therefore, it acts like a blanket over the planet. If the carbon cycle is disturbed, it will result in serious consequences such as climatic changes and global warming. And carbon cycle also plays a vital role in the existence of life on Earth. Next, the oxygen cycle. So the oxygen cycle is a biological cycle which helps in maintaining the oxygen level by moving through atmosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere, and it is interconnected with carbon cycle. The atmosphere is the layer of gases present above the Earth's surface. The sum of Earth's ecosystem makes a biosphere. Lithosphere is the solid outer section, along with the Earth's crust, and it is the largest reservoir of oxygen. According to the Earth's history, oxygen was the first introduced by cyanobacteria to the process of photosynthesis. Earlier, around 4.6 billion years ago, there was no life on Earth planet because the atmosphere was devoid of oxygen. However, today oxygen is freely available in the air and also dissolved in water. It is the second most abundant gas present in the atmosphere and also the most common element of the human body. So this is the stages of the oxygen cycle. So first step, all green plants release oxygen into the atmosphere as a byproduct during photosynthesis, and all aerobic organisms use free oxygen for respiration, and animals exhale carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, which again is used by plants for photosynthesis. So oxygen cycle is just simple as that. So this is some examples uses of oxygen, which is rusting, decomposition, combustion, and breathing. For rusting, this process also requires oxygen, and it is the formation of oxides, which is also called oxidation. In this process, metals like iron or alloy rust when they are exposed to moisture and oxygen for an extended period of time, and new compounds of oxides are formed by the combination of oxygen with the metal. For decomposition, it is one of the natural and most important processes in the oxygen cycle and occurs when an organism dies. The dead animal or plants decay into the ground, and the organic matter, along with the carbon, oxygen, water, and other components, are returned into the soil and air. This process is carried out by the invertebrata, including fungi, bacteria, and some insects, which are collectively called as decomposers. The entire process requires oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Next, combustion. It is also one of the most important processes which occur when any of organic materials, including fossil fuels, plastics, and woods are burned in the presence of oxygen and releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And the last one is breathing. It is the physical process through which all living organisms, including plants, animals, and humans, inhale oxygen from the outside environment into the cells of an organism and exhale carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now we move to the nitrogen cycle. So nitrogen gas makes up about 78% of Earth's atmosphere by volume, far surpassing the oxygen. So nitrogen cycle is a biogeochemical process through which nitrogen is converted into many forms, consecutively passing from the atmosphere to the soil to organisms and back into the atmosphere. Nitrogen is the key component of the bodies of living organisms, and it is found in all proteins and DNA. Nitrogen is abundant in the atmosphere, but it is unusable to plants or animals. And nitrogen gas exists in both organic and inorganic forms. Organic nitrogen exists in living organisms, and they get passed through the food chain by the consumption of the living organism, while inorganic nitrogen are found abundant in the atmosphere. This nitrogen is made available to plants by symbiotic bacteria, which can convert the inert nitrogen into a usable form. Nitrogen undergoes various types of transformation to maintain a balance in the ecosystem. So this is the stages of nitrogen cycle, including nitrogen fixation process, nitrification, assimilation, ammonification, and the last one is the denitrification. So nitrogen fixation process is the initial step of the nitrogen cycle. Here, atmospheric nitrogen, which is primarily available in the inert form, is converted into the usable form, which is ammonia. During this process, um, the inert form of nitrogen gas is deposited into soils from the atmosphere and surface waters, mainly through precipitation. The entire process of nitrogen fixation is complete by symbiotic bacteria, which are known as diazotrophs. Acetobacter and Rhizobium also have a major role in this process. This bacteria consists of a nitrogenase enzyme which has the capability to combine gaseous nitrogen with hydrogen to form ammonia. Nitrogen fixation can occur either by atmospheric fixation, which involves lightning, or industrial fixation by manufacturing ammonia under high temperature and pressure conditions. This can also be fixed through man-made processes, primarily industrial processes that create ammonia and nitrogen-rich fertilizers. Under nitrogen fixation process, there are three other types of nitrogen fixation, which is atmospheric fixation, industrial nitrogen fixation, and biological nitrogen fixation. For atmospheric fixation, a natural phenomenon where the energy of lightning breaks the nitrogen into nitrogen oxides, which are then used by plants. In industrial nitrogen fixation, it is a man-made alternative that aids in nitrogen fixation by the use of ammonia. Ammonia is produced by the direct combination of nitrogen and hydrogen. Later, it is converted into various fertilizers such as urea. For biological nitrogen fixation, um, bacteria like Rhizobium and blue-green algae transform the unusable form of nitrogen into other compounds that are more readily usable. These nitrogen compounds get fixed in the soil by these microbes. So next, nitrification process. So in this process, the ammonia is converted into nitrate by the presence of bacteria in the soil. Nitrates are formed by the oxidation of ammonia with the help of nitrosomonas bacteria species. And then these later produced nitrates are converted into nitrates by nitrobacter. This conversion is very important as ammonia gas is toxic for plants. Next one is assimilation process. Primary producers such as plants take in the nitrogen compounds from the soil with the help of their roots, which are available in the form of ammonia, nitrate ions, nitrate ions, or ammonium ions, and are used in the formation of the plants and animal proteins. This way, it enters the food web when the primary consumers eat the plants. For ammonification, when plants or animals die, the nitrogen present in the organic matter is released back into the soil. The decomposers, namely bacteria or fungi, present in the soil convert the organic matter back to the ammonia. This process of decomposition produce ammonia, which is further used for other biological processes. And the last stage is denitrification. Denitrification is the process in which the nitrogen compounds make their way back into the atmosphere by converting nitrate into gaseous nitrogen. This process of the nitrogen cycle is the final stage and occurs in the absence of oxygen. Denitrification is carried out by the denitrifying bacterial species, which will process nitrate to gain oxygen and give out free nitrogen gas as a byproduct. So that's how nitrogen cycle happen. So this is the importance of nitrogen cycle. The first one, it helps in the conversion of inert nitrogen gas into useful form for plants through a metabolic mechanism. Second, it helps to clean up the environment. Third, it is an essential component of the cell, which forming numerous vital chemicals and biomolecules. Next, it is plants in the production of chlorophyll from nitrogen molecules. The last one, nitrogen cycle helps assisting in the enrichment of the soil with the nutrients essential for agriculture. So the last one, we look at the phosphorus cycle. What is phosphorus cycle? Phosphorus is a key part of nucleic acid like DNA and of the phospholipids that form our cell membranes, and it has a very slow process compared to other cycle. And the phosphorus cycle do not include the atmosphere. Why I say like that? Since phosphorus and phosphorus-containing chemicals only found on land, so the phosphorus cycle does not include the atmosphere. The phosphorus in the rocks is washed into the soil by a variety of meteorological events. Organic matter in the soil absorbs phosphorus, which is required in a variety of biological activities. So there are four steps in the phosphorus cycle, which is weathering, absorption by plants, absorption by animals, and the last one when phosphorus is returned to the ecosystem. So the first step is weathering. In phosphorus can be found abundance in rocks. The phosphorus cycle begins in the Earth's crust for this reason. So the rocks are broken down into phosphate salts, and these salts are washed into the earth and mixed along with the soil. Next is absorption by plants. The plants absorb the phosphate salts dissolved in the water. The amount of phosphorus in the soil, on the other hand, is extremely low. That is why phosphate fertilizers are used on agricultural land. Next, absorption by animals. So animals absorb phosphorus from the plants or by consuming plant-eating animals. And the last one is when phosphorus is returned to the ecosystem. So this is occurs when the plants and animals are died. So they are decomposed by microorganisms. During this process, the organic form of phosphorus is connected into the inorganic form, which is recycled into to soil and water. So soil and water will end up in sediments and rocks, which will again release phosphorus by weathering. Thus, the phosphorus cycle starts over. So that's all for my presentation today. So this is the reference where I get all the informations for this slide. So that's all from me. Thank you.